Chapter 8 is our second chapter on contracts, and we look forward to studying the next elements of a valid contract, the ACLAF designation. We looked at agreement in chapter number 7, and we looked at ways to classify contracts. In this unit, we're going to talk in this chapter about capacity, legality, assent, and hopefully form. All right? And in particular with form, we're basically going to be talking about whether or not it has to be in writing and what kind of writing is sufficient. So that's what we mean by form. Okay? So with capacity as the first one, and that's pretty much the one we're going to focus on today, with capacity, we're going to look at three main issues with capacity. We're going to look at minors. We're going to look at intoxication. And we're going to look at mental sanity. All right, we'll just put it that way. Because if you're a minor, or if you're drunk, or if you're insane, you cannot have capacity to enter into a contract. We would say that it's a little bit unfair to bind someone into an agreement if they are one of these three things. Why? Why is it unfair? What is it about these three here that makes you think it really wouldn't be fair for us to hold them to an agreement if this is their condition? What do you think?
Probably won't be able to comprehend the text.
Exactly. They're not going to be able to comprehend it. They can't understand it. Now, would you say one of those is a little different than the others? How do you say? Kind of depends on the minor. My son's very bright. I taught him at 3 years old how to incorporate a business. I just thought it would be funny if I had him out on the road, and he was just a tiny little guy, and he was always a little bit, advanced for his age in certain terms intellectually. And so I just taught him the basic steps of how to incorporate a business. And not just to memorize it, I actually taught him the steps so that if people asked him questions, he could answer a few rudimentary questions along the way. So I'd dress him up in a little suit and tie, and he'd go with me to some of the things. And I'd say, oh, that's so easy. Even my son knows how to do that. And he's like a toddler. I'd say, Tim, how do you incorporate a business? And he would stand there and say, well, you file articles of incorporation with the Secretary of State. And they'd say, oh, that's cute. He memorized that. And yeah, but what do you have to put in the articles? Well, you're going to need the name of the business, and you're going to need to rattle off registered agents and all these things. And, it was pretty interesting. So I have no doubt that my son now, who's a 10th grader, but still a minor, could, with some teaching, fully understand basic contract. And yet, the law would say, doesn't matter. We're strictly going to look at age. Magic line, 18. Anybody below 18 has an option to avoid the contract. Anybody over 18, that's an adult. We're going to stick it to them. Okay? Now, intoxication. You could make the same case there and say that there are certainly levels of intoxication where someone who's had the proverbial 2 drinks, everybody that ever got pulled over, how many drinks have you had? 2. They always say that no matter how many they actually had, they always say 2. It's almost never true. I guess it's because after 2 you just forget, all the other ones. You can only remember the last 2. But if a guy is not, let's say he's 260 pounds and he's been drinking all his life and he has had 1 beer, it's probably not even affecting him at that point. He could probably understand. And we're going to see that with intoxication, there is a different kind of consideration that has to be taken for that. We have to look at that a little bit differently because it kind of depends on the situation. The other thing about being drunk is that the person you're dealing with may not know that you are drunk, right? There might not be any signs that you are drunk. And so, not you wouldn't do this, but you know what I mean. All right? Intoxication. Then the third one, mental sanity, where we're looking at the ability of an individual to process and understand information. And we're going to look at how that gets treated in the law as well. So first, as we look at this situation with capacity, we're saying this is the legal ability to enter into a contractual relationship. The legal ability. Yes, we're going to try to find out your actual capabilities. Yes, we will. But capacity is saying that legally we are imposing a limitation on what we will even allow you to enter into if you're in one of these conditions. And there are levels. You have full competence. Someone that does not fit any of these categories, all of you, would be in full competence and have absolutely no reason to doubt your capacity. Then there's all the way to the other side of the spectrum. No capacity. The example I'd give you here would be someone who is unconscious, right? No capacity. We talked about the example of the car crash and the unconscious person. One of the reasons why we had to have such a thing as quasi-contract is that it isn't a real contract because they did not have capacity. The other one would be a baby. You know, a baby has no capacity to understand or communicate their intentions. And there have been people that have tried to enter into contracts on behalf of babies. Someone who has been, and we'll get to this in more detail in a moment, but adjudicated by a court as mentally insane. There is such a thing. That does happen. If that has happened, they have no competence. None whatsoever. All right? And then there is such a thing as limited competence. And we do get into this in cases with minors and especially in cases with intoxication. So let's look first and mostly this morning at minors. When we're talking about the capacity of a minor, it's first very important to define what is a minor. In most states, a person is no longer a minor for contractual purposes at the age of 18. There are some states that consider someone an adult earlier than 18, but I'm not aware of any states that consider and wait for you to be considered an adult until after 18. So 18 seems to be the top limit on that. And so by the time someone's 18, we can have great assurance that they are no longer considered legally to be a minor. But what about before that? Well, catch this. A minor can enter into any contract that an adult can. They are legal. They are legal. We looked in the last chapter at statuses of contracts, right? And we said that there's the legal versus illegal. There's the valid versus enforceable versus voidable, right? Those other kinds of things. But the very first thing we have to look at is whether or not this contract is a valid, enforceable contract. And with a minor, the answer is yes. They can enter into a valid, legal contract. But you are standing on a trap door. Because although it is a valid, legal contract, one of the parties, and it ain't you if you're the seller, has the option of getting out of the contract at any time and for no reason. And so you sold them something, let's say you own a GameStop store, right? You're going to be dealing with a lot of minors, okay? And they come in and they sell you their PS3 and you sell them and because they're going to buy a PS4. This is something that I know a lot about because I have a junior high son who's very into this. but Dad, the greatest arguments begin with, but Dad, right? And it usually devolves into something like, because it's cool, and that's not a reason that dads care about, right? So he's going to have to do a little better than that. But Mike really wants a PS4. So let's say Mike, who is 12 years old, walks into your GameStop, and he's got his old PS3, which I've told him, don't sell that, Mike. You got to hang on to that thing. The 4 may not play your games, this kind of thing. But he wants to, and he sells it, and he buys a PS4 and 10 games, and he plunks down my credit card, okay? And you didn't catch that, but you're okay, whatever. And he buys it, and he comes home, and I see this bundle that he's got, and I say, Mike, what did you do? The devil made me do it. Whatever he says, an excuse. That's the usual excuse, a form of that. Usually it's his older brother that's the form of the devil, but that's all right. And so I say, no. Mike, take that back. Now, let's say your GameStop has a strict no refunds policy. All right? And I mean, under no circumstances ever can you make a refund. And so he comes walking back in, probably with me, grabbed him by the back of the neck, and he says, I need to exchange this and get my PS3 back. And you say, sorry, kid, no returns, no refunds. And I look at you as a lawyer and go, oh, this is going to be fun. I've been waiting for you, buddy. Why? I know I have a good case. Why? Because he's a minor. He can avoid that whole contract. It doesn't matter what your policy is for returns. It doesn't matter if he doesn't have a receipt. You've got to undo the entire deal. When the minor avoids at his option, he's not saying there was anything wrong with the product. He's not saying that, I have to have my receipt and it's within the return period. It doesn't have to be within the return period. It just has to be before he turns 18. And he gets all his money back, and you get the stuff back, and we'll talk in a minute about the condition you get the stuff back. And so that's what we mean by voidable. It's his option. Now, when he exercises that option, the legal word for that is disaffirm. He disaffirms the contract. Now, he doesn't know that. He's 12. Give him a break, all right? But he's going to say something like, I want my money back or whatever. And that means I am disaffirming that contract. Now, if I'm standing there, I'll say, Mike, do you disaffirm the contract? Okay. And you'll know the legal term. A contract can be disaffirmed at any time during the minority, and we give you a little buffer after you turn 18. It's almost as if the law says that at age 18, the veil lifts and you suddenly understand the world as it truly is. Your eyes are opened. I mean, I'm sure this was your experience. Your eyes are opened and you now realize how stupid you were as a kid, and you immediately realize all those contracts you entered into were very bad deals. And so you get a little grace period after you turn 18 to go back and disaffirm the contracts that you entered into as a minor. Kind of makes sense, right? If we're going to operate on this legal fiction that 18-year-olds are magically adults, then why not? Okay? And they can ride their unicorn into the car dealership and all the rest of it. Now, he must, when he disaffirms, he must disaffirm the entire contract. He cannot say, well, I like this part where you gave me the cool stuff. I don't like this part where I had to pay you for it. Okay? You can't blue line the contract out and say, well, this or not that. It's all or nothing. And he doesn't have to say any specific words or legal language. He doesn't have to click his ruby slippers and say there's no place like home. All right? It's just words or conduct, express or implied, that indicate he is desiring to exercise his right of disaffirmance. Now, as a shopkeeper, you might wonder, okay, but sometimes minors can be a little hard on stuff. right? So let's use an example of a car. Now, you wouldn't be dumb enough to do this, but some people who had never taken business law and who found themselves as car salesmen might fall into this mistake and sell a car to a minor. No parents are signing off on it, just the minor. And let's say that this minor walks in and he looks pretty rich. You know, he's one of these trust fund babies or whatever. You know, one of these kids that has deep pockets. I used to know kids like that in college. Not here, mainly at the other place. And, you know, they drove a Mercedes onto the campus. You know, they just seemed like they had all kinds of money all the time. And, you know, that's a good kind of friend to have because, hey, pizza or whatever, you know, they just always have stuff going for them. All right. So this kind of a guy walks onto the car lot and he wants to buy a brand new Mustang with the entire package. I mean, it's a little gaudy in your taste as a salesman, but he's got the spoilers and the special wheels. And if there's an upgrade to buy, he wants it. Now, you're kind of excited, right? Because this is the kind of guy you've been waiting for. He's stupid enough to want all that stuff, and you're upcharging him. Now, you want the underbody coating, right? Oh, yeah, for sure. Sweet. All right, that's, by the way, nothing. All right, never do that. And he wants everything upgraded, and so you're making like $60,000 in your own commission off of this deal, right? This car is worth over $150,000, and by the time he's all done with it. So you're pretty excited. So you sign him on the bottom line. He drives the car up the lot. There's always a 3-day kind of grace period, right? And then that goes by because you're kind of biting your fingernails like during that entire time. He doesn't come back during the 3-day grace period. And so now you're thinking, sweet, I actually sold that car. That is awesome. You know, you get a huge fat check and the car dealer's happy and you're salesman of the month, right? Until the next month when Trust Fund Baby decides to drive this sucker back on the lot and say, changed my mind, don't want this vehicle anymore. You look at it, seems to be in one piece. He flips you the car keys. Hard to flip the car. We'll get to that in a minute. And he throws you the keys, and you're pretty devastated by this, and you think, you can't do that, kid. It's beyond the 3 days. I don't know what you know about the world, but you can't be returning a car after the 3 days. It's yours now. It's your problem. And he says, no, you don't understand. My dad's a lawyer, and he told me about this minor can disaffirm thing. And what do? You say, but I was relying on that. We already did, and we made it. Too bad. He is allowed at any time before he turns 18. You say, but I never checked. I didn't know. That's your fault. That's your fault. So, the minor can return the goods. But let's just change it one little bit. Instead of bringing the car back in perfect working condition, which no teenager would ever do, he brings you back the key and a headlight. And he puts the headlight on your desk. And you say, what is this? And he says, well, this is what's left of the Mustang. I was racing and didn't go well. And I flipped the car, and the rest of it's, this is the only salvageable part. Boom. And he just puts it down on the desk. You say, well, I'm not taking this back. I'm sorry, I want all my money back. And you say, well, now listen, this headlight is expensive. I'll grant you that. These headlights are about $350 each. So I'll give you $350 back. But I'm not giving you back $150,000 that you paid for this car. And guess what? In most states, you do not, as a minor, have to give it back in the condition you got it. When you disaffirm, in most states, all you have to do is return the item in the condition it currently is, even if it's trashed. Right? So, now what are you going to do as a salesperson? Well, you're going to cry, okay? And maybe you'll take that headlight and turn it into a trophy or something as a reminder not to sell to minors, right? Because that's kind of the lesson here, isn't it? Isn't that what you're kind of taking away from this is, I'm not going to sell cars to minors. Not at all. Why? Because I don't want to stand on that trap door. I don't want to be wondering when or if and what condition he's going to return this thing. And so most people, when it comes to big ticket items, will not do business with minors. Now, let's just really put our business thinking caps on here. And lawyers have a hard time coming up with these ideas, but regular people usually don't. So I'm counting on you here. What are some things that you could do to still make the sale and maybe protect yourself a little bit if you're selling cars? What do you think, Kristen? There you go. Let's get your lawyer dad to sign on here. Now, can the minor still disaffirm? Yes. But can the dad? No. As long as the dad's like over 18, right? So we have no problem there. And at that point, we're in good shape. Get a parent to sign on. Absolutely. That would probably be the number one and almost only assurance that a shopkeeper can get. Now, in a minority of states, because of the unfairness of this, and because of some popular cases where it was abused, like what I've described, they are changing the law a little bit and saying there's a little crack in the door, right? Like maybe we'll open the door a little bit to the idea that some minors know more about what they're doing than others, and if they're just trying to take advantage, then maybe in some states they're saying that the minor would have to restore the adult to the pre-contract position. That's a fancy way of saying bring the car back in the same condition you bought it in. And if you don't, then we reduce the amount of refund to the actual value of whatever it was you returned. So if you return the car and it wasn't totaled, but all the rubber was burned off the tires because of, burnouts that you've been doing, and it's scratched along the side, and we say, okay, boy, in this condition, this car is only worth about $120,000. That's what you would have to give him back. That's a minority view. Some states are taking that approach. And honestly, isn't that kind of a little more fair? A little more even-handed? Now, because it's only the minor view, it doesn't really lead me to any different advice to sellers. I still would tell the sellers, if you're going to sell big-ticket items and take that kind of risk, get someone else to co-sign on that particular purchase. Okay? Now, let's change it a little bit. Yes, go ahead.
Is there any length of time where insurance or disapproval's done?
Is there any point when the seller can finally have some assurance that this deal is solid now and it's not going to get disaffirmed? Only when the kid turns 18 and that little grace period after expires. Now let's talk about that grace period for just 1 minute before we move on. That grace period expires in one of two ways. One, a reasonable amount of time passes after they turn 18. That's kind of squishy. What's a reasonable amount of time? Well, remember, in business law, when we say reasonable, that's a jury question for your peers. It means we're going to trial and whatever the jury says is a reasonable time. For guidance purposes, it depends on the item. If it's a perishable item, like it's only good for so long, or if it's a cheaply made item or something like that, the amount of time is going to be shorter than otherwise. The second way that grace period expires is if you use the product as an adult. If you gain the benefit of it, even one time as an adult, then you are assumed to have ratified the deal. And at that point, the seller is solid. Okay? No longer voidable after that. But beyond that, it goes by the age of the minor reaching adulthood. There is no other time period that we can look at. So what if this guy comes in to buy the Mustang and he tells you that he's 21? And he even has a fake ID. It's kind of convincing. It has a little fake mustache on there. And, he spelled the state wrong. But other than that, it's pretty solid. And so, you did your due diligence, right? You tried to confirm that this is a minor, because you have a sign now, and it's got that little headlight on it and that little sign that says, we do not sell to minors around here. Okay, we are anti-minors. By the way, we'll get to age discrimination later on. Age discrimination only applies to old people. They have to be more than 40. I'm now in that category, right? You could discriminate against me on age. It's impossible for me to discriminate against you on age, all right? Because it has nothing to do with young age. It has to do with old age. So, perfectly legal for you to put a sign in the window that says, we refuse to sell to minors. All right? That's okay. And this is why. This is why. So what if he lies about it? Well, generally, a minor can still disaffirm even if he lied about it. Why? Why? Well, go back. What is the purpose of this law? What is the purpose of this rule? Who is this rule meant to protect? Sellers? No. Merchants? No. Minors. And so what we're saying is, he's not right in the head. So anything he does doesn't count. You're supposed to protect the minors. It's not up to the minors and what they do, and even if it's bad behavior on their part. So in most states, generally, you can still disaffirm, even if he lies about his age. And again, there's a minority of states that is starting to say, well, that doesn't seem entirely fair, and trying to kind of crack the door open. But again, it's not enough just to say, well, as long as we confirmed age, then it's okay. All right? Yes? Why can't you rent a car? Because a lot of times they want you to be even 25, right? That has nothing to do with contractability. That has everything to do with what? Insurance, which has to do with risk. Okay? That is a risk management issue, not a contract issue. They have decided as a company, people under age 25 are not, as a group, a good risk to loan out your car to. It's going to come back messed up. And that's just based on statistics, actuarial data that they have crunched over the years. Okay? Now, there is one exception. One exception. There is one type of contract that is always enforceable, even against a minor, and that he cannot disaffirm no matter what. And that is a contract for, the legal word is, necessaries. We turned that word into a noun. All right, we just ease. We put necessaries. What is a necessary? Well, food, shelter, clothing. That's pretty much it. So you can sell a minor food, clothing, or shelter, and they cannot disaffirm. My son would really argue hard that video games are, in fact, necessary. But he would not win that case legally. All right? He would be very passionate about it. But he won't be correct. So, vehicles, not on the list, right? But food, clothing, shelter. So if a minor shows up hungry and cold and needs a place to stay, you can sell them food and a hotel room and a jacket, and they can't come back the next day and say, thanks, don't need that anymore. Well, that'd be kind of interesting with a hotel room, wouldn't it? You come down in the morning and say, I'm going to disaffirm the night I just spent in your hotel. That'd be a great, you could live on that, right? At least until you're 18. But that's why in these cases, now think about it. Why do you suppose this is an exception? Why do you suppose the law puts an exception for necessaries? What was the shopkeeper's reaction to the rule that we first laid out? The sign he puts up is, no selling to minors. But when it comes to necessaries, and if we have minors that have been put out on the street or run away from home or just have these needs, Do we want people to throw up signs that say, sorry, we don't do business with minors? No. The whole purpose of this law was to protect minors. And so if we don't make this exception, the law we meant to protect them ends up getting used against them. And so this is a way to carve out a reasonable exception. Now, notice here, reasonable value. You are probably not only getting disaffirmed, but probably going to jail if you take advantage of a minor in what you're selling them. If you raise the price, we have special pricing for minors, and normally this hotel room is $100 a night. For you, it's $500, and they don't know what money, you got a 5-year-old standing there. I can't imagine why, but, and he's peeling off $100 bills because it doesn't mean anything to him, right? And you say, okay, yeah, you know what, and, did you want the Wi-Fi code? Because that's another $100. Oh, okay. You can't take advantage of the minor. It has to be your reasonable price that you are giving them. Now, two things that people have tried to lever into the exception to make it wider than it is. The first is insurance. And they say, okay, well, insurance is now a necessary, right? The law says no. Now, think about this. Insurance, everyone would love to be able to do this with insurance. Because insurance that you buy and don't end up using is basically taking money and flushing it down the toilet, right? I mean, you just threw away money and didn't get anything at all in exchange. And so it'd be great. If you knew the future, you would only have to buy insurance when you actually needed it, right? But the thing about most of us is that we don't know the future, and so we are guarding against the risk that some bad thing might happen in the future. That's what insurance is all about. We'll talk about it many times throughout the semester. And so you're paying this premium on a monthly basis so that you can have coverage under your insurance policy. And as a minor, let's say you enter into an insurance agreement and you pay for insurance for 3 years, between when you're 15 and now you're getting ready to turn 18, and you never had an accident, and so you call up State Farm or whatever, and you say, I've decided to disaffirm that contract going back to when I was 15. And so if you would go ahead and refund my premiums that I've paid, turns out I didn't need insurance after all. Wouldn't that be great? Because now they got to give you all your money back, and you had the benefit of the coverage during those 3 years. That is actually the rule. That is the rule. Insurance can be disaffirmed. It can. That's why you can't get insurance in the name of a minor. The parents always have to sign on as co-insured. Okay? So, insurance, not a necessary, can be disaffirmed. What about loans? I want to take out a loan to buy a car. And then I go back and I not only disaffirm the purchase of the car, but I also want to go back and disaffirm the loan and have you give me all my payments back. And all the interest I paid. As if this contract never happened. Most loans are not necessaries, and therefore most loans can be disaffirmed. Now the exception would be a loan to buy a house, right? Because a house is what? Shelter. And so shelter is a necessary. If the loan was to purchase a necessary, then the loan can't be disaffirmed either. Okay? So with loans, we look at what was the purchase for, and then that's how we decide whether or not it can be disaffirmed. Okay? Alright. Now, we talked about this. Ratification takes place in three ways. One, he can expressly ratify the contract upon turning 18. In other words, I'm now 18, I am a man, and I affirm all of the contracts that I have entered into as a minor. Okay, I don't know many people that do that, but if he did that, or signed something to that effect, that would be intentional ratification or express ratification. Most of the time, it is implied by enjoying the benefit of the contract after turning 18. So that one time you jump in the car and go, now it's yours. You can't go back and disaffirm. Or by the passage of a reasonable time. Okay? And we call that ratification. Ratification. And that, to answer Zach's question, is the only time, once ratification has taken place, that's the only time that the seller can now take a deep breath of relief and know that it can no longer be disaffirmed. Okay? That's minors. Minors. Now let's talk about intoxication for a moment. With intoxicated persons, if they are to the level where they can no longer appreciate the legal significance of their actions in entering into a contract, then we should probably say that that contract is not valid, right? That's just kind of the underlying principle. But there are two issues with intoxication. One, 99% of the time, that person did this to themselves, right? I mean, it's very seldom that someone is intoxicated by accident or by what someone else did to them. It does happen. You hear date rape where there's a drug put into somebody's drink. You hear things like that. And that certainly, by the way, takes away their ability to provide informed consent. That's why sexual activity that takes place when someone is in a diminished capacity is a crime, because they cannot exercise consent. And so we're looking at this in a similar way when it comes to contracts that are entered into. So the first problem is, from a fairness standpoint, they did it to themselves, if it was voluntary intoxication. The second problem is, as we said before, it can be hard to tell when you're the other party that someone is past that level of whatever level that is for them. Because it's unique to them, right? Every person would be different in how they would respond and how many drinks it would take to get them past the ability to truly understand what they were doing. And so, instead of looking at the individual internal, capacity of the individual and their situation, instead of looking at that, legally, we look for objective indications that an outsider could see. So if someone is, I remember watching a Mythbusters once, and that's almost the full extent of my experience with alcohol, is watching people on TV and being around other people that have gone that far. But I remember watching once where Jamie and what's the other guy's name? What is it? Adam decided to test the differences in how many drinks it would take to get a person to a certain level. So they were doing this for science. And the one of them just got quieter. He started out quiet, the guy with the mustache, Jamie. He started out quiet, and he just got quieter. And he was on the blood alcohol content way over the legal limit. He wouldn't have been able to drive or do anything else. But all he did was just sit there quietly. Now, if you didn't know that he was way gone drunk, you wouldn't know, because there wasn't any objective indication of that. And you could have put anything in front of him and he would have signed it. The other guy just got weird. Okay, I mean, he started out weird and he got even weirder, right? And he was sloppy and falling around, and everyone would have known there's something wrong with that guy. He's drunk. Okay, the coordination was gone. He was saying slurred speech. It was very weird. That's the kind of objective indication to someone else. So what the law is trying to do here is prevent people from being overly taken advantage of. That's the only level of protection we're going to give to someone if they are voluntarily intoxicated. We will not let someone take advantage of you if it should have been obvious to them that you were inebriated. Now, here's a real problem, and I'm talking to a bunch of Christian guys and gals that I hope this won't be your experience, but the truth is that in business, a lot of deals get done over dinner where they're drinking alcohol. The truth is, people will use alcohol as a negotiating tactic to try to reduce the defenses. That's another really good reason not to drink, okay? Especially in regards to a business deal, because they will use that. And it does, by its nature, diminish your inhibitions, including business inhibitions that you would have had to certain deals, right? And so, because it's normal in business for people to have a drink or two while they're talking and negotiating a deal, the law does not say that it's invalid, that the contracts are unenforceable if the person had X number of drinks. There's no way we could do that. That's why the law focuses on objective indications. If the objective indications are there that this individual was impaired, then, in that case, it is voidable. It's not illegal. It's not void. It is voidable. And we only give them until they have sobered up and realized what they've done. If they don't object immediately, then that's considered to be ratified and it's no longer voidable. Okay? So that's how we treat intoxication. Next time we come back, we'll talk about mental competence. Have a great day.